G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Caitlin. I'm an American writer living in beautiful Sydney, Australia, and I was so excited when somebody sent this video, Australia's $64 billion mega railway. The reason I'm so excited because this is actually the project that my husband Mark is working on right now. He is currently not driving trucks, he's actually working in the tunnels for this particular project. And obviously because of their privacy and regulations, Mark can't take any sort of pictures or video and show me what he actually does at work, so I have to rely pretty heavily on what he tells me when he gets home. So I'm actually really excited to see some video footage of this, really excited to see what's happening, what this project looks like, and hopefully you guys are too. So grab a Becky, grab a cuppa, and let's get right into this video.
Sydney is getting bigger. A lot bigger. The Australian city is in the middle of building one of the biggest suburban rail projects in the world. This is a $64 billion infrastructure mega project unrivaled in size and scale.
Those TBM heads are massive, you guys. It is so mind-boggling, but also so incredible to see. So they're probably going to touch point on this at some point, maybe. But they're kind of working on two tunnels simultaneously. So it's the team Mark works on, the other team that's doing the same shift, and then they switch for night shift. So if he's working day shift, they have a crew who's working on the same tunnel that's doing night shift. And so 4 crews technically for those 2 tunnels. And for the first time in the Southern Hemisphere for this project, the 2 TBMs simultaneously broke ground. And it's amazing to see those machines. They are immense, ginormous, kind of intimidating.
Scope, extending the city in nearly every direction. By 2030, Sydney will have 113 kilometres of new metro rail and 46 new stations. Driverless trains will run every 4 minutes beneath the harbour and CBD. The country's largest underground railway cavern has been created in the process, as well as its longest transport tunnels. Not since the Harbour Bridge, constructed almost a century ago, has Sydney built such a colossal and, quite frankly, city-defining project.
With how much the city's grown, how is it that in 100 years, roughly, they haven't really built up and developed the infrastructure that's needed? Because I know a lot of people talk about how bad the traffic in Sydney is, and believe me, the traffic's bad, but with the buses and the trains and all these public transport systems that are currently available, how is it that they haven't really fleshed out this big of a project in this century?
Sydney is a city divided. Its iconic harbours make for beautiful postcards, but are an urban planner's nightmare. The north and south of the city are cut off from each other. Now, the history of Sydney's infrastructure has been the history of bridging this gap. Most famously and literally with the Sydney Harbour Bridge in 1932, the tallest steel-arch bridge in the world. It took until 1992 to build the second crossing, the Sydney Harbour Tunnel, a dual carriageway that burrows under the water for nearly a kilometre, connecting north.
That didn't open until the 90s? I don't know why, for some reason I thought it was a lot older than that. I thought this was like a project from the 70s or something. It took them until the 90s to do this. Like, I know construction projects take a while, but the government is slow to catch up on these things.
North Sydney to the Central Business District, or CBD. Now, more than 30 years later, the Sydney Metro is the city's next major crossing, and it's being built in 4 phases. The first has actually already been completed, Sydney Metro North West. It became operational back in 2019, cost 7.3 billion Australian dollars, and included 36 kilometres of track between Chatswood and Rouse Hill. A staggering 15 kilometres of tunnels, 4 kilometres of bridges, and 8 new stations were also built just as part of that phase. The second step, Sydney Metro West, features 24 kilometres of underground metro rail connecting Parramatta to Sydney CBD.
So that's actually the part of the tunneling that Mark is working on right now, is the part that's going out west. And it's interesting because they have different companies that are working on this project at the same time. So it's not just the company that Mark works for who's doing all of this. There's actually quite a few companies that are working on this. A lot of people have their hands in this very pricey pot. Don't get me wrong, we definitely need connections from Parramatta to the CBD because right now so many people are relying on trains, some people rely on buses, so definitely need a connection from Parramatta to the CBD, but what west of Parramatta? I feel like as soon as you get west of Parramatta, the rest of us are just kind of forgotten. especially with them building the airport. I know that has to be at least some part of this project somewhere, because the Western Sydney Airport, supposed to be an international airport too, is going to be huge.
And that's going to cost 25 billion Australian dollars. Now, that's pretty vital because Parramatta is being set up as Sydney's future second downtown. That phase of the railway is due to be completed in 2030. The third phase includes the connection to Western Sydney Airport, costing $11 billion. This new international airport will open in 2026 and is expected to service more than 10 million passengers each year, easing the burden on Sydney's main airport, which accommodates one of the busiest passenger air routes in the world. But perhaps the most exciting phase of the project is the Sydney Metro City and Southwest section that's being built right now. This part of the project consists of two main components. The first is the conversion of 11 stations on part of the existing Bankstown line for use by autonomous driverless trains. The second is a new 15.5-kilometre twin-tunnel rail crossing under Sydney Harbour and through the city. That new tunnel bores 40 metres below the glittery surface of the Sydney Harbour where it reaches the CBD. Carved from sandstone, it's the largest single rail line to be constructed under central Sydney since the City Circle underground.
I can't, I'm so glad that that's not the part of the tunnel Mark's working on, because I already get nervous about the conditions that he's working in, and the thought of him working under the water like that just scares the hell out of me. But it is very dangerous work. It is tough work. It is intense work. These are seriously dangerous conditions, you guys. Silicosis is rampant in the tunneling industry, which was really interesting when they banned those natural stone countertops, stoneware, anything like that, because they were worried about silicosis. But what rules and regulations and laws have been put in place to protect people who do tunneling work, especially since there are so many tunneling projects going on at the moment, not just within Sydney but across Australia. Mining as well. I'm sure silicosis has to be a huge issue for miners, particularly all the way on Western Australia. I can imagine that's a pretty common, unfortunate diagnosis that does happen for people who've worked in the mining industry for decades.
The railway was completed in the 1950s. It's a feat of engineering that included the construction of Australia's largest underground railway cavern at Victoria Cross Station. The mammoth space is 265 metres long, 25 metres wide and 20 metres high. In terms of length, that's comparable to Sydney's recently completed Salesforce Tower lying on its site. Or for those of you not down under, San Francisco's Transamerica Pyramid. It's absolutely huge. Inside this cavern, 31 metres below the streets of Sydney, a new station is currently taking shape. Escalators, a mezzanine, and the platform that future commuters will use are all being constructed. In 2019, tunnel boring machines broke through into the cavern and connected the station to the new train network. It's these machines that have been hard at work beneath the streets of Sydney and under the harbour.
Just so funny seeing perspective, because you can tell this camera's actually really far away. So interesting seeing the perspective on this, because you can tell the camera's really far away. Those machines are massive, and then you see these guys standing next to it and they look so small.
16 of them will have been used on the metro expansion once it's completed. You can kind of think of them like enormous sandstone-eating worms. They operate between 35 and 58 metres.
Which is a pretty good description of them, which is also kind of funny when you think of the movie Dune that just came out. It is kind of like a construction version of Dune sandworms. But on top of that, they might not mention this fun fact. All the TBMs actually have female names on them. Mark's is Beatrice, and the one that's working simultaneously next to them is Josephine. I wonder who actually comes up with the names for these.
Below Sydney, diving beneath existing infrastructure. They typically weigh more than 1,100 tonnes each and reach 120 metres in length. That's about the weight and length of an A380, the world's largest and heaviest passenger aircraft. They work by slowly cutting through rock at the speed of roughly 120 metres a week. They each have a cutter head, which in itself weighs 100 tonnes. That acts as a drill and can tunnel through rock 6 times harder than concrete. The rock is crushed by high-strength alloy steel discs on the cutter head. These rocks are then scooped into the machine's head and onto a conveyor belt, which carries them through the length of the machine and out into the tunnel behind it, before transporting it up to the surface.
So that's what the conveyor belts do. So Mark has a couple different jobs depending on what's going on in certain parts of the construction phase. But one of the things that they do sometimes just in downtime, go up and down the conveyor belts, make sure there's clean, there's no debris in there, there's nothing stuck in there, it's just for the rocks. So now it actually makes sense hearing what those conveyor belts do and what goes on them.
Concrete ring segments are delivered to the building area up front and put in place to hold up the tunnel. Each concrete ring is connected to the previous one in a long chain, and that's how the tunnel is built.
So that's actually part of Mark's job too. It's kind of funny, he doesn't drive trucks anymore, but he basically drives the truck in the tunnels for these ring sections. So they load them up, he drives them in, unloads them back and forth, however many they need. And that's a big bulk of what he does. This cat wants some attention. So that's part of his job. Like I said, he does a lot of different things. Really depends on what's going on, but that's a big chunk of what he does is driving back and forth up and down in the tunnels.
Piece by piece. Each TBM includes a crew of up to 10 people working on them, including an operator at any one time. Inside them are offices, a kitchen, and even a bathroom. A state-of-the-art navigation system keeps these machines on track at all times and ensures they don't accidentally drill into something they're not supposed to. By 2030, these 16 machines will have completed more than 56 kilometres worth of tunnels. That's more than was built to connect Paris and London. Of particular interest is a specialised TBM that had to be purpose-built to dig under Sydney Harbour. It's called a slurry TBM and was used to cut through the different ground conditions in the seabed. It used pipes and fluid to control the pressure in the machine by turning the excavated material into a slurry and then pumping it out. This means the excavated rocks were crushed and mixed with fluid so they could be more easily removed from the tunnel.
It makes sense as you're talking about different kinds of ground in a different area compared to where the other TBMs are, where they're kind of just going under like dry bedrock for the most part. It's got to be scary actually being on the team that's drilling under the harbor, working under the water. The thought alone scares the hell out of me.
This massive infrastructure push will go a long way to addressing the needs of Sydneysiders both now and in the future. By the middle of the century, Sydney's population is expected to increase by up to 60%. Now, not all of those people can or should be driving cars to get around. The city is notoriously congested and has by far the most traffic of any in Australia. In fact, New South Wales is spending $16 billion alone over the next 5 years just to address this congestion and expand Sydney's roads.
It's why they're creating Parramatta as a second CBD, because the first CBD can't hold enough people.
But new roads won't be enough. Sydney, like many major cities around the world right now, is facing a reckoning when it comes to its over-reliance on cars. And expanding its metro in such a massive and thorough way will provide Sydneysiders with a valid new mode of transport. The history of Sydney really has been the history of bridging its divides. And this enormous $63 billion mega project brings each side of the harbour just that little bit closer.
I feel like this isn't quite to bridge the north and south. I think it's to kind of bridge everything in one full circle. Because it's one of the tricky things about Sydney. It is really difficult to get around unless you are getting right on from one train line and getting off the other. Otherwise, it's a bus and then a train and then another bus or another train and light rails and all this other stuff that you need to get from one point to another. It's not really convenient to move around in Sydney. Of course, I was just about to finish and my battery died. But yeah, it's not really convenient to move around Sydney, so this project is so well needed. It seems like it is so long overdue, and it'll be interesting to see when everything actually does wrap up, because like most construction projects, I'm sure this is going to blow out much longer than the timeline that they initially say everything's going to be finished by. But that is it for this video, guys. This was really interesting to actually see some video and see some footage and kind of get a little bit of an idea of what it's like when Mark's actually working in these tunnels compared to just him telling me about working in the tunnels. But if you guys like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button down below. I'd love to get this channel up to 15,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I cannot do that without your support. And if you have any videos that you want me to react to, please pop them over on Discord. I don't check my YouTube comments, you guys, so if you have video recs, pop them over on Discord. I hope you guys like this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video.